everybody, and welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to building better workplaces. Project HR is brought to you by Projections, an IRI company. And IRI helps organizations navigate workplace challenges, improve employee engagement and productivity, manage labor relations, and implement effective communication strategies to achieve their goals. For more information, you can visit Projections online at projectionsinc.com. I am Jennifer Oraquah, Director of Business Development for IRI, and your host for today's episode of Project HR. Now, we all know the drill with the oxygen on the airplanes. In case of emergency, when the masks drop down, you're supposed to help yourself before helping others. The same can be said to apply in business through the concept of purpose-driven leadership. So today, I'm talking with Lan Phan, CEO and founder of Community of Seven, an intersectional, purpose-driven executive leadership development program. Lan, I am delighted to have you here on Project HR.
Hi, Jennifer. So excited to be here.
So we're going to be discussing Community of Seven in greater detail a little bit later, but I feel like the creation of this community is really the perfect explanation of not only what purpose-driven leadership is, but what it looks like in action. Can you share with us the Community of Seven origin story?
Yes, definitely. So last year, I was at Fortune magazine. I thought I had found my dream job.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the executive team reporting into Alan Murray, who's the CEO.
Mm-hmm.
I was an entrepreneur. So basically what that is like an entrepreneur, but using other people's money and building a business within another business. So I was building a startup within Fortune. I had a multi-million-dollar budget to build a company, hire a huge team, and go from product ideation to launch in 6 months, which is ambitious.
Mm-hmm.
Then COVID happened and I got laid off. But what was worse was that I was told that I had to lay off my entire team.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them had left jobs a week prior.
Oh, wow.
So I went into a deep depression, and it was my daughter's voice that really got me out of it. A week after I got laid off, I started Community of Seven. The name came, one day. I wasn't sure what the business model was, but it was going to be called Community of Seven.
Mm-hmm.
And the name actually, when I kind of circle back on it, really came from the fact that I had to lay off this entire team.
Mm-hmm.
I was on hire number 5. I told them right away. I told them that our mission would be from launching a business to finding your next job, or I'm going to build my own business and hire you back. So we would meet 2 to 3 times a week, go over the resumes, give support to each other. And we were this small little group. So there's 5 of them, me, and then my daughter would join. So that's kind of where the first, Community of Seven started.
Oh, okay.
And it's been 2 years and we still meet to this day, like once a month, or not as much, but we still meet, and everyone ended up finding a job, and I launched Community of Seven. So when I launched Community of Seven, I really had no clue what I was building, but I knew in my soul that I wanted to start a company that was focused on helping people. And so we built this platform that wasn't about building an empire or even my business. It was basically about how can we help people during this time. And the strategy wasn't to promote Community of Seven, but how do I really build community online? How do I make people feel less alone? How do I get people through probably one of the most challenging periods in our lifetime? So each day, I post something which is like a micro learning or a motivation. Growing up, I would read, there's this, it's a non-denominational, it's called Unity. And they have this thing called Daily Word. And it's like a prayer, a daily prayer. And I would read this growing up. So I wanted to create something similar for executives and leaders, and just people in general who wanted, positive content and motivation. Because I think that's kind of how we grew so fast, because it really resonated with me. And I focus singularly on my core values and how can I help people. And each month we get about 6 to 10 million people viewing Community of Seven content online.
Crazy.
And what's powerful about that is that those are millions of lives that I can impact. And, will it generate income? I'm not sure, but I don't really care. Can it help someone reading it? A resounding yes.
And I'm proud to consider myself one of those 6 to 7 million viewers every month, those 250,000 followers that you have. Clearly some fantastic leadership going on here, and dedicated to the goals and the objectives that you set out. What in your mind makes a good leader?
I think at its essence, leadership is about influence. Whether it's in the home, community, or at a Fortune 500 company, usually when we think of leadership, we're thinking of the government, or we're thinking of leadership in work, but you can be a leader in your house,
Mm.
in your community.
Mhm.
The question is, are you going to use that influence for to be a force for good or the opposite?
Mhm.
And I'm a firm believer that the best leaders are servant leaders.
Mhm.
The main goal is to serve,
Yes.
whether it's your employees, your customers, and society. There's been a movement away from the traditional leadership model where it's focused just on profit and short term growth. A real movement away from Milton Friedman's notion of the sole purpose of corporations is for shareholders' good,
Mhm.
to the stakeholders, which is expanding the definition to include employees, customers, communities, and the environment. And I think second, leadership is really about creating more leaders. It's
Mhm.
not about you. You
Mm.
know, and it starts with hiring the right teams and training them. There's this quote. Uh, I'm not sure who said it, but I find it really powerful. Nothing will kill a great employee faster than
Mhm.
watching you tolerate a bad one.
Mhm. Yep.
But over and over again in companies big and small, we have companies hiring, keeping, and promoting the a-holes, right?
Mhm. Yep.
We hire the bullies, and we wonder why people leave. We wonder why teams aren't motivated. We wonder why the team is so quiet. When you
Mhm.
tolerate the one a-hole, you kill the
Mhm.
culture of the whole.
Yeah.
So since it's been about 20 years since I've kind of been a manager or managing or leading. And I would always say in interviews, I have a no asshole rule. I do not hire assholes. And that's the first thing I say in every interview.
Sure.
Um, because I think that the thing is, good leaders make those around him or her better.
Mhm.
And in order to do that, you need to select the right people as well.
Mhm.
And I guess a third thing in terms of leadership is that a good leader creates structure and process for people to win. And that takes vision and innovation, being able to see around the corner, being able to anticipate the unexpected. I remember during the beginning of COVID, there was this meme, and it was like, who brought digital transformation to your company? And it was A, CEO, B, the CTO, and C, COVID-19.
Mhm.
And I think that's the thing is like, the companies and the leaders that kind of saw around the corner
Mhm.
were already on the clouds, understood that they needed to kind of be nimble,
Mhm.
be flexible for work from home. And the ones that didn't got left behind.
Mhm. For sure. I want to go back to something that you said just a minute ago. You're talking about the greater objective of a company not being the shareholders, but being the employees. And I think that mindset has changed quite a bit over the years. Over the course of your career, have you seen the definition of an ideal leader evolve?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say also, I'm just going to speak for myself personally. When I was first starting off as a leader, and I can say now that I was immature, I equated leadership with power and making my numbers,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
Did I make the quarterly numbers? Yes. Did I get a promotion? Yes. I was a good leader. The problem with that philosophy is that it doesn't ask the other important question: how is my staff?
Mhm.
Are they happy? Are they advancing? How are my retention rates?
Mhm.
Did I help the company get better? As I got older and more experienced, I realized that leadership wasn't about making short term goals. It was about long term success and the
Mhm.
mental health and well being of my team.
Mhm.
And it was about protecting them from the bullshit around them so they
Mhm.
could succeed in their jobs. And it was about creating organizational structures and systems so that everyone could focus on contributing in the best way they could at their given role. And
Mhm.
it's about allowing people to win so that the company can win. And so that was kind of the shift in my definition, was kind of being it from it being about me and the individual wins to the greater whole of the good.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And my philosophy in leadership is, I support the people that report to me so that they can have success. And it's about their success, not about mine at all. So
Exactly.
when did you first learn about the idea of purpose-driven leadership?
I think I got my first glimpse in purpose-driven leadership from I guess, on a micro level. Was one day I was talking to my manager at that time, Bill Zangle, and he told me a good leader is the first to give credit and the first to take blame.
Mhm.
And it really reframed my belief in leadership. It's not about you; it's about the team. It's about the group, and it's about protecting your team.
Mhm.
And looking back, I really had to work on being less selfish,
Hmm.
right? And
Mhm.
always having to win at all cost. Um, in some ways, those are the traits that get a lot of people from individual contributors to becoming managers, is because they might win at sales or they might contribute to whatever it is. But then once you become a manager and a leader, it's about it's about making other leaders, right?
Hmm.
And then I start thinking about how I started to understand purpose-driven leadership on a deeper level and on a global level was when I joined Fortune magazine.
Hmm.
So even though that time was short, it was transformative for me. I still think of the story that Alan Murray, who's the CEO of Fortune, told me. So in December 2016, he got a call from the Vatican. So Pope Francis had requested that Alan curate and bring 100 of the top CEOs from the world's largest companies to Rome to really deliberate on things that the private sector could do to address global social problems. And so the belief was that capitalism had the ability to change society. And it was at that moment that where all of these leading companies and CEOs moved from shareholder to stakeholder capitalism, right?
Hmm.
And I just read something the other day. I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, and it kind of talked about some of these major CEOs from Bank of America, Visa, Ernst and Young, Johnson and Johnson, Salesforce, and other Fortune 500 companies joining forces with Pope Francis to promote a more inclusive form of capitalism in a new organization called the Council for Inclusive Capitalism with the Vatican. So you're starting to kind of see those movements, and you would not have seen that 20, 30 years ago.
Hmm.
But I really think that there is this move to understand, because here's the thing with these big businesses. In the past, when they only focused on, shareholder good, which is making profit and making the quarterly number, it didn't mean that you had a better product. It doesn't
Hmm.
mean that you had better retention rates or that your customers were loyal to you, right? And if you decimate the environment, if you kill off your customer base, you will not be profitable in the long run.
Right.
And so it's one of those things where it's kind of this like, of course, this is, you can't, run on these traditional models and expect um, long term success.
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic example of how purpose driven leadership is really good for business.
Yeah.
All right, Lan, I need to take a quick sponsorship break right now, but when we return, I want to talk about how we can all become more purpose driven leaders. So stay with us.
Employee dissatisfaction can lead to union organizing activity, potentially disrupting operations, leading to costly lawsuits and negative publicity for your company. The IRI Labor Relations Consulting team brings with it a wide range of expertise, from former labor management executives to human resources professionals, and even award-winning communication experts. We'll help you create an environment where employees feel valued. Our goal is simple. We help your company thrive while creating a positive working environment. Get started today with a personalized labor relations readiness assessment from IRI. We'll provide you with a customized roadmap and the resources you need to succeed. Visit us at iriconsultants.com to learn more.
We're back with Lan Phan, CEO and founder of Community of Seven. So, becoming a purpose-driven leader isn't something that happens by attending a seminar or reading a book. It's a long, intentional process built around our life's experiences. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, definitely. Living your purpose is more than a fancy mission statement on your website. It informs everything you do, day in and day out. It's what your business places above everything, even
Hmm.
profit. So, it's how a business, how a leader acts at every step of the supply chain, from the vendors they choose to your marketing campaign, how you treat your employees, even the ones on the lowest rung of this imaginary ladder, right? How are you treating the janitors, right? Um, do you have, what's your work from home policy?
Hmm.
You look at companies like Patagonia, right? Who charge a higher premium. But when you think about Patagonia, they really live their purpose, right? They encourage customers to not buy their clothes and to reuse them.
Hmm.
They have a child care center for their workers in their headquarters. And yet, during 2008 and 2009, when there was a deep recession, Patagonia was thriving,
Mm-hmm.
and people were willing to pay that premium because becoming a purpose-driven leader requires that you do the difficult things day in and day out. And I
Mm-hmm.
always tell the leaders that I work with that it's not just good enough to know your purpose and your values, you need to live them, even when those choices are difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we make things complicated. There's only really two ways that you can change anything, right? It's by adding things that serve you and contribute to whom you want to become and your
Mm-hmm.
purpose,
Mm-hmm.
and subtracting things that don't serve you, period. So I think that's the whole notion. It's companies, if they're really wanting to live their purpose, they need to really go through this editing period. What are
Mm-hmm.
the things that don't align with my values? What are the things that align?
So you recently wrote a post on LinkedIn about understanding your own value in the workplace, and it said, "Stop shrinking yourself to fit into places that you've outgrown." It was all about all the things that you have been told to stay in your lane, and you're not good at this or that. I feel like this is part of the introspection that we need to become more purpose driven in our work.
Yeah, definitely. I think we, as employees or workers or whatnot, we are we kind of live our lives based on what other people define as success. And one of the things I think I said in the quote was stop making yourself small to accommodate weak and small minded people,
Mm-hmm.
and that their inability to see your worth does not decrease your value.
Exactly.
And we put so much weight in terms of what other people think of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess another thing that I had said in that quote was betting on yourself is scary.
Mm-hmm.
Believing in yourself can be difficult. But you know what's even scarier? Staying in places that don't appreciate you,
Mm-hmm.
staying in places that don't celebrate you, letting people make you feel small, being exactly where you are 5 years from now, and not becoming who you were meant to be.
Yeah.
And I think part of that process of living your values is really about understanding what is important to you. And when I got laid off, I went through this deep introspection in terms of what's important to me. And it was four things, and they've been a constant all my life. I just didn't articulate it.
Mm-hmm.
One is my family and my friends who are my chosen family.
Mm-hmm.
Two is my faith. Three is being of service to others, helping people. And four has been freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Yet none of the jobs I've had in the past fulfilled any of those four values.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I thought Fortune was my dream job, I was commuting 3 hours a day. I was getting home at 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I would see my daughter on the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how can that be aligned with my values if family is the most important thing, but I don't see my daughter on the
Mm-hmm.
weekday,
Yeah.
right? Same thing with freedom. I never really had true freedom because I had to report into the CEO and the editor in chief and all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think part of like shaping your next decision, whether and you don't have to be an entrepreneur, whether it's your own company or you're working for a company, you need to make sure that there's alignment with what's important to you, your values, with the company. Because, and I'll give you a really good example. One of my members for Community of Seven, really powerful CMO, really powerful leader. She wasn't working for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And she got this opportunity to work for this tobacco company. It would have paid her, probably in the seven figures.
Mm-hmm.
She would have had, team, like a huge team, hundreds of employees under her. And she didn't take it. And I was like, you didn't take the job? She was like, it didn't align with my values because I believe in health.
Mm-hmm.
And I could not work for a tobacco
Mm-hmm.
company.
Yeah.
And so when you're so aligned with what your values are, your decisions in terms of who you work with, who you partner with, who your clients are, is
Mm-hmm.
informed by those values.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And, looking at that as someone who's in marketing, you definitely can't market a product you don't believe in. So once you've gained insight into your own values and goals and your own core competencies, you can then turn your attention to the values and goals and the core competencies of what you want to do in your work. Is that how it works?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, well, it gets complicated, right? Because it's a lot harder. Uh, Being the owner of my company, it's a lot easier for me to shape the company, right?
Hmm.
Because I'm building it from the ground up,
Right.
right? I can build the foundation, I can build the walls, the shingles, the roof.
Hmm. Hmm.
But when you are an employee working for a company, I think the decision whether there's alignment has to come before you even take the job,
Hmm.
because it's a really difficult to come into an organization, especially let's say a company that's been around for 200 years, and expect to change it one person.
Hmm.
Even if you're the CEO, I've seen CEOs quit in frustration because it's very difficult to change a publicly traded company and the culture, especially if it's been around for a few, like 100 years. But
Hmm.
I think you can kind of change small parts of it, right? So if you are a
Hmm.
contributor and you are in the marketing department or you're in the procurement, which reminds me of another one of my members. She was in procurement at this really big CPG company. And what she did was she changed the procurement process within that organization, right? Where
Hmm.
she started to treat the vendors kindly.
Hmm.
She made sure that it was diverse in terms of gender and in race.
Hmm.
So I think but so she was able to make her mark in
Hmm.
her area of expertise. But in order to change an entire company, that takes a movement. So
Hmm.
that's a little bit more complicated.
And I was going to ask, after, let's say we sit down and we do all this introspection about our own values and where we want to be, if we find that there's little or no alignment between ourselves and our organization, is it possible to find meaning with a company that doesn't share your values? And in that example you just gave, I'm guessing the answer is yes, but what are your thoughts there?
I mean, one of the best advice I got when I was younger was this: some people find a profession that becomes their passion, right?
Hmm.
Think about doctors and teachers and whatnot, right?
Hmm.
And some people work for a job and they go home to their passion and their purpose.
Hmm. Sure.
I mean, that might sound negative, but I think, can you? I think it depends on what those values are and how important they are to you,
Hmm.
right?
And how at odds they are with what you're actually in.
Exactly. Like
Hmm.
for me, the whole family thing is so important. Yet I realize that in every job I've had in the past, uh, you know, but I think partly it was me and my kind of desire to kind of push things. I would work till 9, 10 o'clock at night every night, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So part of that is personal decision as well, but it's also kind of how corporations are kind of structured.
Hmm.
I think you I think it really depends on the company, and more importantly, it depends on the manager, because your experience at any company, you can have the most amazing company that is aligned with your value, but if the person you report into is an a-hole, right?
Hmm.
Your experience is not going to be positive.
Sure. Yeah, that's true. So, presuming you can align your values, at this point, you bring your team into it. Is this an active process to bring them over, or is it simply an act of modeling that you can hope will be followed?
I definitely think it has to be start from the beginning,
Mm.
right? And so it starts in your hiring practice, right? And who are you hiring, but also who are you keeping? Because a lot of companies will keep these toxic managers and whatnot because maybe they perform well in sales or in their function,
Hmm.
but it really creates a culture that's not psychologically safe.
Hmm.
And so I think it starts from the very beginning, which is hiring the right people that have similar values or who believe in your company. And I think the next most important thing is to train them,
Hmm.
right?
Sure.
Because, you might have the most amazing staff, but if they're not trained or if they don't have the right, structure to succeed, they're never going to be able to win.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. All right, Lynn, we're going to take some time out for another quick break. We're going to be right back after this. You're listening to the Project HR podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Oraqua, and my guest today is Lan Phan, CEO and founder of Community of Seven. Now, we touched on the origins of Community of Seven earlier, and I'd like to discuss that a little bit further. Can you share with us how Community of Seven works and the benefits that it provides to its members?
Yes, there are two parts of Community of Seven. We have a membership community and we do corporate training and consulting. So, our membership community really has two parts, this core community, which is our invite only membership. And so, we meet monthly in curated groups comprising of C-suite executives, including CEOs, presidents, founders, and other types of change makers. And we kind of go through this 1 year process where the reason why it's called core communities is we really focus on your core values. And this group is accountable for making sure that you actually live your values.
Mm.
And so we go through this 1 year process with our core community. The other membership we have is our supporter membership, which is only $99 a year. And for me, it was a means to really democratize executive training, which typically costs upwards of 500 an hour. So it was my aha moment when I was, I've had the privilege of getting executive training because I was on the executive teams in the past, but most people don't have that opportunity.
Mhm.
And so I created our supporter membership when I realized, there was a report by McKinsey and Lean In that really talks about the broken rung, where it's you first need to fix that first level from for women going to the first managerial level, right? And the thing is, you need training and development and sponsorship to get there. So I've really been passionate about getting more women and BIPOC men and women in executive roles. And I started really digging deep into, this whole thing with the broken rung and the messy middle. And
Mhm.
one of the key things I realized is that there's a lack of sponsorship, access to leadership, and most important, training and development. So what if I could create something that can solve for that? So while I was creating it, I also knew I wanted it to be centered around creating purpose focused leaders. So I tell people that Community of Seven is about bringing people together to change the world while changing yourself along the way.
Mhm.
So it's an intersectional, purpose-driven community of leaders, and our members, I think, understand that they, before they can be change makers, before they can change the world, you need to be aligned with your values, your purpose, and you need to really focus on, as you said in the beginning, putting your oxygen mask on first,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
So personal development is core to Community of Seven. And the second thing that I launched afterwards, earlier this year, was training for corporate clients. And with the focus of really, how do you create communities of belongingness at their organizations, right? Um, some people call it psychological safety. So we do, coaching circles, mindset training, community building. Before I was an executive and marketing for over 20 years, I was in teaching and curriculum. So I got my master's in education and training and curriculum at Harvard. I did my undergrad in psychology. So it's kind of roundabout. I'm going back to my first love, which is education and training.
Hmm.
So I've always been fascinated by how people learn and how education can be key in transforming people's lives. My daughter was in Montessori. And one of the things I love about Montessori is that the older kids and younger kids are mixed together because the younger kids learn from the older kids and the older kids learn by teaching.
Mhm.
And in corporate, we forget this. So in corporate training, think about the typical training, right? You bring in 30 people in a room, they sit for 6 hours, they might learn one or two things, but they forget as soon as they get back to their desk, right? And so a lot of what I focus on is micro learnings and training.
Mhm.
Because when I left academia and I went to corporate, I never lost my passion for learning.
Mhm.
And as I rise through the ranks, I would benefit from this myriad of corporate trainings, conferences, and executive coaching. um, but like I said, the current model is broken because most people can't access that,
Mhm.
especially women and especially people of color.
So, a member's experience in the Community of Seven is centered around their core community. Can you tell us a little bit how that's structured, how that works?
Yes. So it's selective in that it's invite only. So you actually have to
Mhm.
be nominated by a member
Mm.
in order to join. And it's kind of alignment with bringing the same kind of purpose driven type of leaders
Mhm.
who are really hyper focused on changing the world. And it's called core, as I mentioned before, because we really focus on our core values, our purpose. What is our reason for being? Why were we put on this earth, right?
Mhm.
And it's not just to make money. is to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And our members are leaders in their industry. They're activists looking to change the world. They're founders in the C-suite or rapidly approaching it. And really, we believe that their decision aligned purpose and with their core values is really going to shape their organizations, their industries, and
Mm-hmm.
even society.
Yeah.
And we really kind of focus on, in terms of that experience. It right before I got on this call, it was really funny. We actually have a WhatsApp group for all of our different core groups, and this one of the members was emailing about negotiating getting her office space, and I had 3 or 4 executives just chiming in with advice and
Mm-hmm.
links and videos.
Sure.
And I think that's the experience that we're trying to create, is this community. Because another lesson that I learned when I was in the executive world, talking to a lot of executives, was that it's really lonely at the top.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're not really supposed to show weakness in the corporate boardroom.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you go home, your spouse, definitely your children, can't really relate to the experiences that you're having, right? And the pains that you're suffering. And so you don't have anyone to talk about these issues with. So the purpose of this core community is for really these groups to really create real community. I always tell my core members that my ultimate goal is to move you from strangers to friends
Mm-hmm.
to family.
Mm-hmm.
And when you create that, that's what really community is. It's about really people who care for you,
Mm-hmm.
who are there for you, who want to grow with you.
Yeah.
And I think it's this whole kind of journey that we take. And so even within that too, we have like these micro learnings and let's talks that we do that they can attend as well. And then we kind of meet in person as well, especially after COVID.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I love what you're talking about because it's really just sort of taking the idea of mentorship to a completely different level. I think it's an interesting perspective for
Well,
sure.
you learn from as much from teaching as you do from
Mhm,
passive
mhm,
learning, right?
mhm,
And so everyone has something to teach, and everyone has something to that they can learn from,
mhm,
right?
for
And
sure.
and I think that is the power of it.
Yeah.
You can learn from both teaching and learning.
And you mentioned some of the teachings that you have and things that are available to members. You also run a series of online events. Are those open to the general public, or are those strictly for members as well?
Yes, they are open to the public, and I made them free on purpose, which I realized people were really kind of hurting and people wanted community. So I've been doing this actually. I started them actually when I was at Fortune magazine, and it was the beginning of the pandemic. And Mina Malik, who at the time was the head of diversity and inclusion at Unilever, and one of my good friends, we were like, God, wouldn't it be great if we could have a place where we could just talk,
Mm.
right?
Mhm,
And because this is like the beginning of the pandemic, everyone was isolating at home. We were homeschooling kids,
mhm.
stressed out of our minds. I don't know if you remember this, but there was I remember when I was at Fortune, literally 7 in the morning till 6 o'clock, it was back to back meetings on Zoom. It was crazy. And we were trying to try to homeschool. Uh, and
Mhm,
so we did these Let's Talks bi-weekly, and then it morphed into micro learnings. And we've had everyone from Anne Marie Squio, who was the chief brand and communication officer at Xerox. She's also a core member. We had Raja Rajamanar, chief brand and communication officer and president of MasterCard Health. Denise Lee Yoon came and talked about how to be a public speaker. Laura Manis, CEO of Havas,
mm,
about leadership during COVID. And I basically opened it to the public. We have one, coming up in the next week, focused on, meditation and how it can really deal with stress.
mhm.
But we have like just a range of speakers that are really meant to kind of inspire people and, just have a forum where they can really kind of like be inspired and learn.
Mhm, mhm. So if I wanna listen, I wanna learn more about, the events that you have going on, where can our listeners go to learn more about this?
Yeah, they can go to communityof7.com. So community of seven spelled out,
Mhm,
seven spelled out. Or you can just find us on LinkedIn, the Community of Seven page. We post daily, and they can connect with me as well, Lan Phan. on LinkedIn. I post every day, and I'm always trying to create a bigger community of people like really looking to kind of help and support each other. And we also do corporate training on leadership. So if you're a company that really wants to kind of try a different kind of model, an innovative model of training,
where can we
reach
go to
out.
learn more about that? Is that also at Community of Seven, or is there another location for that?
Yeah, we're going to be launching the training page soon, but they can go to Community of Seven
Okay.
for now, and then we'll be updating it probably in the next week or so.
Perfect. All right. And I want to let everybody know that those links will be included in this episode's companion guide. So be sure to unlock that today at projectionsinc.com/podcast. Right now, though, Lan, it is time for our lightning round questions. And these are questions we ask of every guest of the podcast. Are you ready?
Yes, ready.
All right. So our first question is always a topic showdown. In this episode, we've been talking about purpose-driven leadership. So in your opinion, Lan, which of these quotes best defines your thoughts on the concept of purpose? The purpose of life is a life of purpose, or the purpose of life is to find your gift and the meaning of life in giving it away?
So definitely the latter. So the purpose of life is to find your gift, and the meaning of life is to give it away.
Okay, next question. What is the best book you've read recently?
So I'm one of those people who read 2 to 3 books at a time.
Me too.
So I'm rereading Atomic Habits, and there's this amazing book called Company of One. That's awesome.
Outstanding. All right. What's your favorite thing about the work that you do?
That I get paid to help people.
And what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Stop giving a shit about what other people think of you. What they think of you is none of your business. And please don't let other people define your worth.
For sure. All right. Last question. Who or what inspires you?
I'm inspired by people who don't give up.
All right. Thanks so much for joining me today on this week's episode of Project HR, Lan.
Thank you. Really appreciate you having us.
And thanks too to our listeners. And once again, this is your reminder to grab that companion guide for this episode at projectionsinc.com/podcast. If you'd like to be on Project HR or know someone who would, feel free to email us at projecthr@projectionsinc.com. And last but certainly not least, to make sure you never miss an episode of Project HR, we hope you'll subscribe to the podcast. Drop us a line, leave us a review, or give us a handful of stars wherever you get your content. That's it from me for now. Let's make it a great day at work.